Good morning, everybody. Distinguished ministers. I think we are ready to begin. Excellencies, Assistant Secretary General, Mr. Montiel, distinguished delegates, ladies and gentlemen, it is an honor for me to be elected as chair of the 54th session of the Commission for Social Development. But I think for Amina, this seat was really fitting very well to her, so maybe next time she will be elected the chair. It is now my privilege to welcome you all the 54th regular session of the Commission for Social Development. This session of CSocD, which is one of the oldest functional commissions of ECOSOC, comes at a critical point in time. We are the first functional commission to meet after the international community has charted a new map for sustainable development by adopting the Addis Ababa Action Agenda, the Agenda 2030 for Sustainable Development, and then the historic Paris Agreement to combat climate change. We therefore have the opportunity to review the path of advancing social development, especially in implementing the Copenhagen World Summit for Social Development, and to extract lessons on how this Commission can contribute to the implementation of these new landmark global agreements. As stated in the Agenda 2030, adopted by the head of states and government last September here at the UN headquarters in New York, one of the global challenges that deserves our entire energy and full commitment remains the eradication of poverty in all its forms and dimensions, including extreme poverty. At the same time, social and economic inequalities persist and in many cases have increased. Many of our fellow citizens remain vulnerable to poverty and exclusion, often as a result of forces beyond their control. Recovery of the global economy from crisis remains uneven, fragile, and slow. Unemployment, particularly youth unemployment, continues to be a major concern. We have confronted with a variety of threats in terms of health, natural disasters, conflict, violent extremism and terrorism, and their subsequent impact on the displacement of people and humanitarian crisis. All this put at risk the development progress achieved in the past decades. Climate change is another vital challenge of our time, and if not appropriately tackled, it risks to be also a challenge to our children's lifetime. A proverb of North American indigenous people says, "Treat this earth well. It is not a present from your parents, it is on loan to your children." While all UN member states confront specific challenges in their pursuit of sustainable development, we cannot forget that special needs of the most vulnerable countries, as first mentioned by world leaders at the World Summit for Social Development and reiterated in the Agenda 2030 for Sustainable Development. These are some of the main challenges we face as we embark on implementing the social development goals. Agenda 2030 is also proposing a new transformative, people-centered approach, highlighting the interlinkages and the interdependence between the three dimensions of sustainable development: social, economic, and environmental. Given the 20 years of experience we have gained in keeping track of progress in implementing the World Summit for Social Development and in guiding social policy, I do hope this Commission will be able to guide the way to the implementation of the Agenda 2030 by carrying out its mandates in areas such as poverty eradication, employment promotion, social integration, inequality reduction, and programs related to disadvantaged and vulnerable social groups, in particular youth, persons with disabilities, older persons, in all areas requiring a social approach. Excellencies, distinguished delegates, ladies and gentlemen, it is our responsibility to strengthen the social pillar of sustainable development by focusing on promoting inclusive social policies that are formed by evidence of country and by regional experiences. Given the program of action for social development forged in Copenhagen, as well as our Commission's undisputed experience and expertise, let me recall you that this is its 54th session. We have now a unique opportunity to make the difference and impact on people's life in the new context of the Agenda 2030. I particularly welcome the three panel discussions that we are going to have this week, beginning this afternoon with the high-level panel on the priority theme, Rethinking and Strengthening Social Development in the Contemporary World. This will be an excellent opportunity for members of the Commission and other key stakeholders to engage in a substantive dialogue on policy options to further implement the internationally agreed social development targets. The debate will further contribute to the outcome document of this session, to the resolution on the same topic. This debate will be followed in the morning of Tuesday, 4th of February, by a panel discussion on the emerging issue, which is implementing the 2030 Agenda for Sustainable Development, moving from commitments to results for achieving social development. The topic echoes the theme of the high-level segment of CSocD in 2016, and also reflects the efforts of the Bureau to align the work of the Commission to that of CSocD by selecting themes that can enhance the social component of the work of the Council. The selection of this topic acknowledges that how the 2030 Agenda is translated into national policies and strategies and implemented and monitored plays a key role in promoting inclusion and participation and hopefully in advancing a comprehensive vision of social development. Last but certainly not the least, the Commission will hold a panel discussion in the morning of Friday, 5th of February, on the implementation of the post-2015 development agenda in the light of the Convention on the Rights of Persons with Disabilities. The debate was mandated by the Member States with a view to further elaborating on how the existing mechanisms and entities within the UN system can contribute to strengthening the mainstreaming of disability, to enhance awareness and cooperation at all levels on the implementation of the Agenda 2030, and to consider the possibility of another monitoring mechanism on disability for the Commission during its 54th session. All the themes are timely and, I dare to say, are relevant, and I hope they will provide a framework for innovative ideas for concrete social development. The Commission will also consider issues pertaining to Africa's development and the situation of social groups, namely persons with disabilities, youth, older persons, and the family. And in this regard, the Commission will review reports of the Secretary General of the Social Dimension on the new Partnership for Africa's Development and on the implementation of the objectives of the International Year of the Family and its follow-up processes. The Commission will also hear a presentation by a youth representative from the ECOSOC Youth Forum during the opening session. And the Secretary General's envoy on youth, Mr. Ahmad Al-Hendawi, and Ms. Catalina de Vandas Aguilar, Special Rapporteur on the Rights of Persons with Disabilities of the Human Rights Council, will also join us during the session. Distinguished delegates, ladies and gentlemen, as this is the policy session of the two-year cycle of the Commission's work, the expected outcome of this session on the priority theme, and I repeat it, rethinking and strengthening social development in the contemporary world, will be an action-oriented resolution. This will be a significant opportunity to build on our shared experiences in implementing the World Summit for Social Development and to contribute to the implementation of the 2030 Agenda. I very much look forward to working with all delegations on this critical and important resolution that will reflect the substance of the discussions during this cycle, with the hope, of course, for a positive outcome. In this regard, it is important to place a strong emphasis on concrete social policies that can ensure that no one is left behind. This is, as you certainly know, the central pledge of the Agenda 2030. We know that promoting policies with focus on growth alone will not be sufficient to reduce poverty and inequalities. Our message and policy suggestions to decision makers should therefore strongly underscore the imperative that growth must be inclusive, sustained, and equitable. It must contribute to job-rich economic growth, poverty eradication, reduction in inequality, promotion of social integration, and protection of the environment in order to ensure leaving no one behind. This Commission needs to continue to bring national experiences to United Nations bodies with the goal to identify concrete steps to implement the Agenda 2030 and help countries to implement the Sustainable Development Goals, having in mind that people and planet are central to development. We need to further harness the synergies between the Agenda 2030 and other major international policy frameworks devoted to social development, especially, as I already mentioned, the World Summit for Social Development that can accelerate progress, particularly in, again, I repeat, eradicating poverty and achieving inclusive development for all. In this regard, the work of the Commission on the promotion of employment creation, social integration, empowerment, and participation of all people provides, I believe, a solid foundation to build on. To achieve these goals, our Commission should focus on ensuring greater policy coherence and coordination across the board in its work. We need to engage all stakeholders, governments, civil society, academia, the private sector, global and regional organizations, people living in poverty, and those in disadvantaged and marginalized groups. During this session, prominent speakers from member states, United Nations entities, academia, and civil society will present their valuable inputs. It is my hope that the youth delegates will continue the tradition of presenting creative and innovative perspectives to the works of the Commission. May I recall you that the youth topic was first introduced on the United Nations agenda in 1977 during the 25th CSocD session, which at that time was held in Geneva. It was chaired by Romania, and it was a Romanian initiative. Many civil society representatives are here supporting our efforts to strengthen social development, and I count very much on you. So, ladies and gentlemen, given what is expected from us in supporting the implementation of the Agenda 2030 for Sustainable Development, the Commission will also reviewing its methods of work during the current session. To guide our future work, we need to focus on how we can best contribute to the implementation and to the global follow-up of the agenda, while fulfilling the existing mandates and leaving room to take new ones if required. We should consider what adjustments, if any, would be needed to the Commission's agenda in order to complete this task. The Secretary-General report on critical milestones towards coherent, efficient and inclusive follow-up and review at the global level, released on January 19th, explores how to put in place a follow-up and review system at the global level with the mandates outlined in the Agenda 2030. It also underlines the importance of each functional commission to seize this opportunity to participate in the review of the agenda in accordance with its mandate and to follow up based on the guidance provided by the high-level political forum with regard to their contribution to its work. These are important and, I admit, challenging tasks, and I look forward to the active participation of all delegations and of our partners. I am fully confident that this will allow the Commission to remain relevant in the new development landscape. Distinguished delegates, ladies and gentlemen, I am convinced that this Commission must and can play an even greater role in strengthening the social pillar of sustainable development and in providing relevant policy guidance on the social development priorities identified in the Agenda 2030. With all this being said, I thank you for your attention. I look forward to a productive and successful session, and I count very much on your most valuable support. I think now we should, if we are ready, move to the election of officers. Sangeeta, you have to guide me. So, Excellencies, distinguished delegates, I now invite the Commission to proceed to the election of the remaining officers of the Bureau for its 54th session. As you may recall, the Commission elected by acclamation Ms. Amina Smaila of Nigeria. We have seen Amina earlier here on the chair seat. And Ms. Janina Hase-Moshin of Germany as vice chairs of its 53rd and 54th sessions. At the first meeting of its 53rd session on 21st of February 2014. At the first meeting of its 54th session on 13th of February 2015, the Commission elected again by acclamation Ms. Luz Andujar of the Dominican Republic as the vice chair for the 54th session, and postponed the election of the vice chair from the Asia-Pacific states. In this connection, I am pleased to inform the Commission that the Asia-Pacific states have endorsed the candidature of Mr. Mohammad Hassani Nejad Pirhuni of the Islamic Republic of Iran as vice chair of the 54th session of the Commission. Additionally, as delegations may be aware, Ms. Janina Hase-Moshin of Germany has resigned from her post as vice chair of the Commission. Subsequently, the Secretariat received from the Western European and other states the endorsement of the candidature of Ms. Ines Coroa of Portugal as the vice chair of the 54th session of the Commission. In the absence of any other candidates, may I therefore take it that the Commission wishes to elect, and I repeat, Mr. Mohammad Hassaninejad Pirkhuni of the Islamic Republic of Iran and Ms. Ines Coroa of Portugal as Vice Chairs of the 54th session of the Commission for Social Development. I hear no objection. It is so decided. This is a very useful instrument. On behalf of the Commission, I would like to congratulate Mr. Mohammad Hassaninejad Pirkhuni of the Islamic Republic of Iran and Ms. Ines Coroa of Portugal on their election, and I look forward to continue our fruitful cooperation along with the rest of the Bureau members of the Commission. I think the next point is related to the designation of a rapporteur. So I wish now to inform the Commission that following consultations within the Bureau, it has been agreed that our distinguished Vice Chair, Mr. Mohammad Hassaninejad Pirkhuni of the Islamic Republic of Iran, will assume the responsibility of rapporteur for this session of the Commission. I therefore invite Mr. Pirkhuni to take his seat at the podium. Hassani, where are you? Please join us. I would like now to inform delegations that following, again, consultations in the Bureau, it has been agreed that the division of responsibilities among the Bureau members would be as follows. I am coordinating with the kind assistance of my colleague, Ms. Elisabeta David of Romania. Elisa, where are you? She's my right hand. So I will coordinate with her most valuable support the consultations on the draft resolution on the priority theme, rethinking and strengthening social development in the contemporary world. Ms. Amina Smaila of Nigeria is the Vice Chair responsible for the draft resolution entitled Social Dimensions of the New Partnership for Africa's Development, coordinated by South Africa on behalf of the Group of 77 and China. Amina, hands up. Okay, she's there. And Ms. Luz Andujar of the Dominican Republic is the Vice Chair responsible for the draft resolution on the review of the methods of work of the Commission in the context of the follow-up of the Agenda 2030 for Sustainable Development. Luz? Thank you. I look forward to working closely with all members of the Bureau, and I wish them every success in their demanding and important work during the coming days. I now invite the Commission to turn its attention to item 2, entitled Adoption of the Agenda and Other Organizational Matters. The provisional agenda for the session is contained in document E/CN5/2016/1. That's the UN abbreviation, I'm sorry. And The proposed organization of work is before you in Annex 1 to the same document. The proposed organization of work is also outlined in a tabular format contained in an informal document which has been made available on the website of the Commission for your advance information. I now invite the Commission to consider the provisional agenda for the session, which is contained, I repeat, in the document E/CN 5/2016/1. The provisional agenda and documentation was approved by the Economic and Social Council in its decision 2015/212. Are there any comments on the provisional agenda? Okay. May I take it that the Commission wishes to adopt the provisional agenda? Silence means approval. So I hear no objection. It is so decided. Let's move to the organization of work. Distinguished colleagues, I now invite the Commission to turn to the proposed organization of work as contained in the Annex 1 to the document I have already mentioned. And in this regard, let me first make a few general comments about the conduct of our work. I would like to seek your cooperation in starting all meetings on time, that is 10 o'clock a.m. and 3 p.m. sharp, so make sure you buy your coffees a bit earlier. We need to make optimum use of the conference resources allocated to the Commission, and thus reaching an utilization factor above 80% benchmark as requested by the General Assembly in its resolution 70/9 on pattern of conferences. In other words, we have to be efficient. In this regard, to achieve the optimum utilization of conference servicing resources, the Bureau is proposing the following adjustments to the proposed program of work. The formal meeting on Monday, 8th of February in the afternoon would be cancelled. I give you time to have a look on it. And agenda item 3 and 4 will be considered in the same morning meeting. This will allow delegations additional time to conclude negotiations on any outstanding draft proposals. And finally, I am pleased to inform you that the United Nations Secretary General, His Excellency Mr. Ban Ki-moon, will make us the honor to address the Commission on Monday, 8th of February, in the morning session. May I take it that the Commission wishes to approve its organization of work as orally revised, on the understanding that eventually further adjustment will be made if necessary during the course of the session. If no objection, it is so decided. In accordance with past practice, I would like to make the following proposals concerning the time limit for statements during the general discussion. First, member states speaking on behalf of groups will be allowed to speak for 10 minutes. Second, member states speaking in their national capacity will be allowed 7 minutes for their statements. And finally, all other speakers will be allowed to speak for 5 minutes. Are there any comments? So may I take that the Commission agrees with this proposal? Thank you. It is so decided. I think I need some water. Oh, thank you. Distinguished delegates, as mentioned earlier, the Commission will hold 3 panel discussions during this session. In order to ensure that we can have meaningful and interactive debates during the session, I kindly request you not to read prepared statements during the panel discussions, but rather to be prepared to interact, to propose new, eventually innovative ideas, and to share your experiences. The goal of our session is to draw up on good practices and lessons learned. And I'm sure there are so many good examples to be shared in this room. Thank you, Leni. I would also like to remind delegations that paper smart services are offered as an additional service for the 54th session of the Commission. Delegations wishing to circulate their statements electronically through the paper smart portal should send a copy of the statement at least 1 hour in advance of delivery to the paper smart email provided in the journal. The statements will be made available on the Commission paper smart portal during delivery by delegations. I also wish to remind delegations that the deadline for submission of all draft proposals to the Secretariat is next Tuesday, 9th of February at 5 p.m. So please don't be late. For further details on the submission of draft proposals, please contact the Secretary of the Commission. We have reached now a most important moment of our morning session. It is my pleasure to invite Mr. Leni Montiel, Assistant Secretary General for Economic Development, to address the Commission.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Chairman, Excellencies, distinguished delegates, ladies and gentlemen, I'm pleased to join Ambassador Ion Jinga, Chair of the 54th session of the Commission for Social Development, in welcoming you to this important session. I also thank you, Ambassador Jinga, and members of the Bureau for your able leadership. This session of your Commission has a special significance. As Ambassador Jinga just mentioned, yours is the first functional Commission to meet following a momentous 2015. During the past year, the world adopted 4 landmark agreements that are destined to shape a new era of sustainable development. The year began with the adoption of the Sendai Framework for Disaster Risk Reduction in March, followed by the Addis Ababa Action Agenda on Financing for Development in July, the historic 2030 Agenda for Sustainable Development in September, and finally the Climate Change Agreement in Paris last December. These milestone agreements send a very powerful message that the international community is committed to leaving no one behind as it embarks on this new journey. As the Secretary General has stated, the 2030 Agenda is the most inclusive development agenda the world has ever seen, building on the progress achieved under the Millennium Development Goals and other international agreed goals, such as those contained in the World Summit for Social Development. The new agenda places people and planet at the center of development. Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen, the work of this Commission is particularly important to achieving the 2030 Agenda for Sustainable Development. It is expected, together with other functional commissions, to play a critical role in the follow-up and implementation of the new global agenda. This includes providing a platform for member states to deliberate on social policies to advance social development and to share country experiences and challenges, as well as raising awareness and mobilizing global action to implement the new agenda. Distinguished delegates, enormous progress has been made since Copenhagen. Since 1990, more than 1 billion people have been lifted out of extreme poverty, and the proportion of undernourished people in the developing regions has fallen by almost half. Significant progress has also been made in achieving universal primary education, adult literacy, promoting gender equality and empowerment of women, and in reducing maternal and child mortality. Despite these successes, progress remains uneven. Many countries continue to grapple with the after effects of the global financial and economic crisis, particularly its impact on jobs, poverty, inequality, and exclusion. The world economy has not improved sufficiently to alleviate the fears of many. Falling commodity prices have refocused attention to the sustainability of growth in many resource-dependent developing countries, including the ability of these countries to sustain critical public investments in poverty eradication programs, in education, health, and infrastructure. The challenge on the jobs front remains daunting. According to the International Labour Organization, we need to create over 600 million new jobs by 2030, about 40 million each year, if we are to keep pace with the growth of the global working age population. There is also the need to improve conditions faced by the 780 million working poor, those women and men who are working but are not earning enough to lift themselves and their family out of the $2 a day poverty. High and increasing levels of inequality remain in many countries, reducing the impact of growth on poverty reduction. Furthermore, millions of women, youth, persons with disability, older persons, and indigenous peoples continue to face exclusion from mainstream social, economic, and political life. A lack of equal opportunity implies that these social groups cannot realize their full potential, hindering our ability to realize inclusive and sustainable development. Let us therefore reaffirm the Copenhagen commitment to changing laws and practices and removing those physical and institutional barriers that hamper full participation by all. Addressing these pressing challenges requires that this Commission, through its deliberations, provide the kind of policy guidance that will help countries take bolder steps to build more inclusive societies. Societies where the hopes and aspirations of all citizens are supported by social and economic policies that work together to foster inclusive and equitable growth, job creation, and provide quality education, health care, and social protection. Distinguished delegates, with the adoption of the 2030 Agenda for Sustainable Development, the Commission is presented with new challenges and opportunities. You can enhance your work in promoting progress in social development in the context of the new agenda. You can integrate your work related to disadvantaged and vulnerable groups, including persons with disabilities, youth, older persons, and families, into ensuring that no one is left behind. You can build on your strength in fostering an integrated policy approach to contribute to the implementation of the 2030 Agenda. I'm confident that the Commission will step up its efforts to support the implementation of this Agenda for Sustainable Development while continuing to implement its mandate emanating from the World Summit for Social Development. You have our department's, DESA's, full support in your endeavors. I look forward to following the deliberations of the Commission and their outcomes. Thank you very much.
I thank Mr. Lenny Montiel for his thoughtful and inspiring statement, for joining us this morning, but also for reminding us some success stories we have achieved together. For instance, that since 1990, more than 1 billion people have been lifted from poverty, and also some of the challenges ahead of us, as for instance, the fact that we need to create 600 million jobs from now to 2030. It's not an easy task. I now invite the Commission to begin its consideration of Agenda Item 3, entitled Follow-up to the World Summit for Social Development and the 24th Special Session of the General Assembly, with some Item A, Priority Theme, Rethinking and Strengthening Social Development in the Contemporary World. Some Sub-Item B, Review of relevant United Nations plans and programs of action pertaining to the situation of social groups. And Sub-Item 3C, Emerging Issue, Implementing the Agenda 2030 for Sustainable Development, moving from commitments to results for achieving social development. The documentation under Agenda Item 3 has been published in today's journal. I now give the floor to Ms. Daniela Bass, Director of the Division for Social Policy and Development of the Department of Economic and Social Affairs, to introduce the documents under Item 3 as a whole. Ms. Bass.
Mr. Chairman, distinguished delegates, ladies and gentlemen, thank you and good morning. In my capacity as Director of the Division for Social Policy and Development of the Department of Economic and Social Affairs, I have the honor to introduce to you 3 Secretary General reports and 1 note by the Secretariat that prepared to support your deliberations on the emerging issue. So for your convenience, a list of documents, those I am going to introduce this morning in full text, is available on our website, that is social.un.org. The first report I would like to share with you is the Secretary General report on the priority theme, Rethinking and Strengthening Social Development in the Contemporary World, presented under Agenda Item 3A, and it is contained in document is/CN5/2016/3. So this report draws upon the 2030 Agenda and the deliberations of the Commission at its 53rd session. And this report considers the new context, new approaches, and identifies new opportunities for social development. And in particular, I would like to highlight the fact that it analyzes the key linkages between the social, the economic, and the environmental dimensions of sustainable development. And it also provides examples of policies that leverage the synergies among these 3 dimensions. This report, the report notes that social policies that cover everyone are essential to fulfill the vision of the new Agenda 2030. In an era of growing inequalities, global insecurity marked by climate change, and recurring economic, food and energy crises, as well as increasingly precarious job prospects, strong universal social policies are crucial to increase resilience and leave no one behind. The report stresses also that social policies must be part of a broader and coherent development strategy. Therefore, align macroeconomic policy frameworks with social and environmental goals, and overall moving towards coherent policy frameworks, it is critical to strengthen social development in the contemporary world. The report provides concrete, forward-looking policy recommendations to strengthen the social dimension of sustainable development and proposes specific avenues for action by this Commission. The report stresses that, 1, governments must deliver on their commitment to provide nationally appropriate social protection systems, including social protection floors and essential public services for all. The Commission can use its leadership to help further the implementation of universal social protection and public services. And the Commission can also ensure that such measures will put a particular focus on the needs of the most vulnerable and excluded groups and individuals. The second point, governments should reorient macroeconomic policies towards the reduction of inequalities and the creation of more and better jobs. The Commission can contribute to promoting policy coherence, particularly between social and economic policies, as well as to share successful national practices, identify emerging challenges, and cooperate in fostering integrated policy making. The report also urges governments to foster broad-based participation in policymaking and governance processes, and the Commission can play an important part in ensuring that policy implementation and monitoring processes, including those for the 2030 Agenda, will be participatory, paying particular attention to including and acting upon the voices of vulnerable and excluded groups and individuals. Mr. Chairman, the second report I would like to brief you about is the report of the Secretary General on the social dimension of the new Partnership for Africa's Development, contained in document E/CN5/2016/2, that highlights the growing optimism about Africa's future. In particular, the report notes the significant progress that African countries have made to eradicate poverty and hunger, improve education and health outcomes, as well as improving agricultural productivity and investing in critical infrastructures. Furthermore, the report discusses the critical role that structural transformation through industrialization can play in fostering inclusive development through job creation. And the report further makes a case for why Africa needs to prioritize domestic resources mobilization to finance its development priorities. The report also notes that as welcome as Africa's economic growth and progress in several social developmental areas, critical challenges persist and new ones have emerged. So with over 40% of sub-Saharan Africa's population still living on less than $1.25 a day, extreme poverty remains a concern. So, is persistent and rising inequality are to be taken into consideration. Many African countries have not fully recovered from the shocks from global financial and economic crisis, food and energy price volatility, as well as the recurrent outbreak of diseases such as Ebola. Peace and security issues, terrorism, and human weapons and drug trafficking also continue to undermine social progress. Therefore, to improve livelihoods, the report encourages African countries to vigorously promote economic transformation, including through deliberate public policies in sectors that accelerate development, particularly investments in education, health, agriculture, and infrastructure development. Then there is the need to foster political stability, to promote peace and security, and strengthen the governance, policy, and institutional environment. and to invest in agriculture and rural infrastructures, as well as to strengthen the capacity of smallholder and family farmers, in particular rural women and youth, through gender and youth-balanced investments. The report also encourages the UN system to continue to promote, support, and facilitate in a coordinated and coherent manner the exchange of experience among African countries in the implementation of continental and global development policies, including the recently adopted African Union Agenda 2063 and the 2030 Agenda for Sustainable Development. Mr. Chairman, following the Agenda 3B, let's focus now on the Secretary General's report on the implementation of the objectives of the International Year of the Family and its follow-up processes. And this document is contained in A/71/61E/2016/7. The report highlights recent family trends, emphasizes the need for access to justice through fair family laws, and despite considerable progress, discrimination against women in the family laws persists. It is critical to break the silos of violence in family and in society. Violation of women's and children's rights within families is often not sufficiently endorsed by adequate legislative frameworks. Legal frameworks, the enforcement of laws, as well as change in attitude are indispensable. And the report highlights initiatives carried out at national and international levels in support of the objectives of the International Year of the Family and its follow-up framework. Family policy focus has been credited with poverty reduction and better work-family balance in many countries and in various regions. Importantly, family policies have a potential to advance the 2030 Agenda for Sustainable Development. For instance, they can contribute to ensure healthy lives and promoting well-being and learning opportunities for all ages. Agenda item 3C, Mr. Chairman, addresses emerging issues. With this year's theme on implementing the 2030 Agenda for Sustainable Development, moving from commitments to results for achieving social development. A note on this by the Secretariat is contained in document E/CN5/2016/4, and it has been prepared to facilitate the discussions. The note focuses on certain specific areas that are important for the integrated implementation of the 2030 Agenda for Sustainable Development, in which the Commission could play a key role within its existing mandates. These areas can be seen as crucial interlinkages that catalyze social progress and development in the current global context, while at the same time underpinning progress in several economic, environmentally oriented goals. And these areas include reducing inequalities, addressing multiple dimensions of poverty and hunger, promoting productive employment and decent work for all, social inclusion and inclusive development to leave no one behind, as well as investing in universal access to basic social services. The note also maps out some options for the Commission to consider in order to effectively contribute to the follow-up and review processes of the 2030 Agenda from a social development perspective. It includes with guiding questions for further discussion during the 54th session of the Commission. So these hopefully will guide discussions on this very important topic. So, Mr. Chairman, Excellencies, distinguished delegates, in closing, I would like to thank you for the opportunity to present these reports. I trust that you will find the main messages and recommendations of these reports useful to you, as you proceed with your deliberations. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
I think Ms. Daniela Bass fully deserves a big round of applauses for her statement.
My people.
I thank the Director of the Division for Social Policy and Development for her comprehensive, encouraging, and motivating statement. Daniela, the examples you have given to the Commission will be a good starting point and additional motivation, raising awareness about the importance of the topics on our today's agenda. And I also agree with your remark that global insecurity marks and influence the climate change. I would now like to invite Ms. Margaret Mays, Chair of the NGO Committee for Social Development, to report to the Commission on the outcome of the Civil Society Forum, which was held yesterday. I have met Ms. Mays a couple of weeks ago. We had an exceptionally fruitful discussion. I have attended yesterday the Civil Society Forum, and I was impressed by the quality of the debates and by the interest people show in our Commission's work. So I look very much forward to hear Ms. Mays today. Please.
Thank you, Ambassador. Am I on?
Yes.
Okay. And I would like to just take this opportunity to publicly thank Ambassador Yinga for his unfailing support of civil society in general and for his support of the NGO Committee for Social Development in particular. It means a great deal to us. Excellencies, distinguished delegates, ladies and gentlemen, thank you for this opportunity to address you on behalf of civil society and to formally present to you the 2016 Civil Society Declaration. As has been said, we gather here today at a unique moment in the history of the Commission for Social Development, in that it is the first commission to take place following the Third International Conference on Financing for Development, the adoption of Agenda 2030, and the historic Climate Summit in Paris. This being the case, the relevance and the importance of this commission must not be underestimated. Indeed, its contribution to the discourse on social development and its impact on people's lives is indispensable. In the outcome document, Transforming Our World, Agenda 2030, heads of state and governments pledged to, and I quote, free the human race from the tyranny of poverty and want, and to heal and secure the planet. They also pledged to take the bold and transformative steps which are needed to shift the world onto a sustainable and resilient path. End quote. There is no doubt that Agenda 2030 is breathtaking in scope. The integrated nature of the Sustainable Development Goals and the interlinkages between those goals and the work of this Commission are of critical importance. If there was ever a time to vacate the long-standing silo mentality of United Nations processes, it is clearly now. In the Secretary General's report, Rethinking and Strengthening Social Development in the Contemporary World, he states unequivocally that it is social development which underpins a sustainable future. The Secretary General says, pursuing development that is people-centered and grounded in the principle of social justice will be fundamental to achieving socially, economically, and environmentally sustainable development. It was precisely this message that was reaffirmed last year as we celebrated the 20th anniversary of the World Summit for Social Development in Copenhagen. This summit placed people at the center of development. Historically, in its annual follow-up to the World Summit, the main focus of this Commission has been poverty eradication, full and decent employment, and social inclusion. However, as the Secretary General reminds us, progress in social development since 1995 has been uneven and fragile. Growth has neither been inclusive nor equitable, and rising inequalities are hindering poverty eradication and other social development goals. And to add an even greater sense of urgency, the state of global social development is increasingly at risk due to major global trends: climate change, recurring global economic, food, and energy crises, and growing inequality, both within and among countries. As with the Millennium Development Goals, we note that the first Sustainable Development Goal calls for an end to poverty in all its forms. The question which civil society asks is very simply, is there the political will to make the elimination of poverty in all its forms a reality? Concerted action in this direction would truly reflect the desired people, planet, prosperity challenge offered in the Transforming Our World 2030 Agenda outcome document. In a similar vein, the Civil Society Declaration of 2016 calls to mind the challenge presented in The Future We Want, the outcome document of Rio +20. Namely, we strive for a world that is just, equitable, and inclusive. But at a time in history when the world's richest 62 individuals control as much wealth as half of humanity, these words seem hollow at best. The extent of inequality in our world today is breathtaking, and it must be dealt with if this Commission is to be true to its focus on poverty eradication. Civil society, then, calls on this 54th session of the Commission for Social Development to heed the Secretary General's challenge to close the gap between our determination to ensure a life of dignity for all on the one hand, and the reality of persisting poverty and deepening inequality on the other hand. This concern with inequality is by no means a recent phenomenon. The Copenhagen Declaration noted that we are witnessing the expansion of prosperity for some, accompanied by an expansion of unspeakable poverty for others. This contradiction is unacceptable and needs to be corrected through urgent action. We, as civil society, believe that we already have at hand the tools which are needed in order to address inequality. But they must be embraced, enhanced, and employed with greater vigor and without delay. These tools include the commitment to leave no one behind and to reach the furthest behind first. Long-term planning and goal setting. Education, with special attention to the education of girls. Gender equality in decision-making. Social protection floors. Participatory economics, expanding the pool of those who make decisions that impact the lives of those who are most vulnerable. Financial transaction taxes. And all of these elements would contribute immeasurably to Sustainable Development Goal 16, which aims to promote peaceful and inclusive societies for sustainable development. Excellencies, what was true in 1995 in terms of poverty and inequality has reached epic proportions 21 years later. Civil society believes that the Commission for Social Development is an indispensable mechanism for addressing this challenge. Therefore, we call upon the members of the 54th Commission to become proactive agents of change for the sake of people, planet, and prosperity. In transforming our world, the 2030 Agenda, heads of state and governments noted that we can be the first generation to succeed in ending poverty, just as we may be the last to have a chance of saving the planet. The world will be a better place if we succeed in our objectives. We would like to suggest very clearly that the world will be a better place not if you succeed, but rather when you succeed. Time is of the essence, and there is absolutely no better time than the present for the work to begin. And please know that the NGO Committee for Social Development, as well as civil society throughout the world, is ready and willing to partner with you in any way that we can. Thank you.
I thank the chair of the NGO Committee for Social Development for her presentation. I think it was a very clear and lucid state of play of what civil society expects from us with regard to social development. I would now like to welcome Ms. Jasmin Burmeister, who was the German youth delegate and participated in the CSocD Youth Forum held on 1st and 2nd of February 2016. Ms. Burmeister will update us on the discussions in the forum and their relationship with the work of the Commission for Social Development. So, Jasmin, the floor is yours.
Thank Thank you, Ambassador Jingar, Excellencies, honorable delegates, ladies and gentlemen. I'm an official German youth delegate, but I'm speaking in my own capacity. On behalf of the young people who participated in the ECOSOC Youth Forum over the past 2 days, thank you for the possibility to make the links between the Youth Forum, the 2030 Agenda, and the Commission on Social Development. The focus of this year's Youth Forum was on youth taking action to implement the 2030 Agenda. After all, the discussions, and rightly so, were not limited to implementation, but also highlighted the key role of young people and their representative structures in the entire agenda, including decision-making around the agenda, monitoring, accountability, and review. To sum it up, the role of young people and their organizations must be recognized as a leading one in this process. The Youth Forum brought together member states from capital and from missions, representatives of youth organizations, youth delegates, young political leaders, the UN agencies and bodies. However, it was disappointing sitting in the opening of the forum and seeing a number of empty seats behind member states' nameplates. And it was not less discouraging to see a number of those who were present at the opening disappear before the breakout sessions began. The breakout sessions where many intense discussions were held. This would have been the opportunity for you to have real, interactive, face-to-face dialogues with the youth representatives from all over the world just being here at the United Nations, as many of you expressed an interest in your statements. The ECOSOC Youth Forum traditionally offers this chance to move from words to action on this. This year's forum offers the opportunity for regional sessions too, where participants gathered to discuss key issues, challenges, and priorities for young people in their respective regions and in relation to the 2030 Agenda. Specific recommendations were shared per region, and there was a great appreciation and recognition of the importance of having such discussions at a regional level. Participation and partnership were the key words of the forum. Participation of young people and youth organizations in policy making, in decision making, in politics, and in all of this in relation to the 2030 Agenda and its 3 pillars of economic, social, and environmental development. We look forward to this commission, considering youth engagement in the social development pillar and the connections with the other dimension of the 2030 Agenda as a key part of its work. There is not enough specific reference and attention to young people within the 2030 Agenda, as I myself realized during the Adoption Summit when actually counting with other youth delegates the few references that there are. But the strong consensus from the ECOSOC Youth Forum highlighted that despite this, youth needs to be at the heart of the entire agenda if we are to achieve sustainable development. It is relevant for youth, and young people's participation in it is relevant for the world. We have the power to change the world, yes, but we need the right space, support, and recognition for this to happen. Young people's participation is needed across the whole of the agenda, as all of the goals are relevant to young people, and will therefore depend on our input and our contribution not only today, but across the next 15 years. But the ECOSOC Youth Forum also took the time to consider in more detail some specific policy areas that address challenges that young people face. Education, youth employment, climate change, poverty, inequalities in youth empowerment in urban areas, health, peaceful and inclusive societies, gender equality and the empowerment of women and girls. Many recommendations and messages came out of the discussions in plenary and breakout sessions. Some of these are: young people need better health education and health care that is accessible, affordable, and of good quality. Action on gender equality is needed for all the SDGs, not just SDG 5. This requires more women in leadership in public and private sector. Increased participation of youth in decision-making at all levels is the key to conflict resolution. It's essential to recognize young people as peace builders and beacons of hope to overcome war and violence. And last, young people need access to decent jobs, and job creation should focus on the question of quality. The global initiative on decent jobs for youth, launched by the ILO at the ECOSOC Youth Forum, aims to address this question by scaling up action and increasing impact through effective, innovative, and evidence-based intervention in a strategic alliance. The 40% of young people in the labor market who are unemployed or working in poverty are in urgent need of results from this initiative. And the young people having participated in the forum have high hopes for it. However, when we see as participants rightly remind at the forum that unpaid internships remain a widespread practice within the UN system, it's clear that there's contradiction and there's much work still to be done. Youth taking action to implement the 2030 Agenda was the focus of the last 2 days. But it's not just about our concrete contribution to the implementation itself. If we take this agenda seriously, youth has to play an important role in the monitoring process too. And hence, youth has to contribute to the intergovernmental review of the implementation of the 2030 Agenda. Youth-led organizations, including national youth councils, should have the possibility to contribute to this review. Plus, young people's contribution should also be ensured through participation of official youth delegates as part of member states' delegations to the high-level political forum. To conclude, the ECOSOC Youth Forum 2016 recognized that young people, and particularly youth-led organizations and the Major Group for Children and Youth as official space for youth participation in several UN processes, need to be seen as partners in the 2030 Agenda and in the advancement of social development. This partnership must also be seen in the organization and preparation of and in the participation in the ECOSOC Youth Forum 2017. We are looking forward to it. Thank you.
I thank Ms. Burmeister. Thank you, Yasmin, for your fair, honest, full of energy and motivating presentation. I fully agree with you. The young people must be recognized as leaders in this process. And let me tell you something. 2 days ago, I have attended a side event in the margins of the Youth Forum, an event organized by the president of the ECOSOC, which was attended by the UN Deputy Secretary General, Mr. Jan Eliasson. And Mr. Jan Eliasson has said the following, and I quote him. He said, "Youth are not only the future, they are also the present. And they are not the object, but the subject of policies we design today on social development." So thank you once again. I think it's time now to begin the general discussion on sub-item 3A, the priority theme, rethinking and strengthening social development in the contemporary world. But before giving the floor to the first speaker, I would like to remind all delegations to kindly respect the agreed time limits. And in order to assist speakers in managing their time, the red light on the microphone will start blinking when 1 minute is left as a signal for the speaker to begin wrapping up the intervention. So having said that, I now give the floor to the distinguished representative of Thailand, is the permanent representative of Thailand On behalf of the Group G77 and China, the ambassador, the permanent representative of Thailand, is for the year 2016 the chair of the G77 and China. It is a very, very important group in the General Assembly, and we very much count on the G77 plus China to support and promote the goals of our commissions. Mr. Ambassador, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and thank you for your kind words. Please rest assured of full support from the Group G77 for your work. Excellencies, distinguished delegates, I have the honor to speak on behalf of the Group of 77 and China. At the outset, allow me to extend our group's warmest congratulations to you, Mr. Chair, and the members of your Bureau on your election to the respective positions at this 54th Commission for Social Development. The Group of 77 in China assures you of our full support and cooperation towards a successful conclusion of this very important session of the Commission. I would also like to express the Group's appreciation for the Secretary General for the submission of reports to this session of the Commission, which will certainly help to enrich our deliberations in the week ahead. Mr. Chair, this Commission is the first functional Commission of ECOSOC to embark on its work in the new year after the formal adoption of the 2030 Agenda for Sustainable Development. So, it is a critical year for many reasons. For the CSocD in particular, we are rethinking and strengthening social development in the contemporary world against the backdrop of efforts underway to implement and concretize the follow-up and review of the 2030 Agenda for Sustainable Development. It is a golden opportunity to deliberate on how the international community can reinvigorate all pending commitments made in the Copenhagen Declaration and Programme of Action. While the international community embarks on an integrated, ambitious and impactful sustainable development agenda, there is a clear sense of urgency in achieving the required transformative change. We will need the highest level of commitment to have better discussions and outcomes within the Commission in order to strengthen social development and reach the universal goals and commitments we have agreed upon. In this regard, Mr. Chair, the Group of 77 in China would like to underline once again the importance of the World Summit for Social Development held in Copenhagen from the 6th to the 12th of March 1995 and welcome the commemoration of the 20th anniversary of the World Summit that took place last year in the 53rd session of the Commission for Social Development in the Economic and Social Council and in the General Assembly. Mr. Chair, poverty eradication, one of the three interrelated pillars of the Copenhagen Declaration, continues to be a major challenge for the international community. Recent